Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today I wanted to share with you the Arcana of Astrology Oracle Deck and Guidebook for Cosmic Insight by Claire Goodchild. The Arcana of Astrology invites you to harness the magic of the cosmos. To find clarity and tap into your intuition with this deck of celestial theme oracle cards, the deck depicts the archetypes of astrology with art inspired by vintage star maps and cards featuring the zodiac signs, the 12 houses, the planets, moon phases, and major asteroids. So I am a fan of Claire Goodchild's work. I love all of her decks, and I was really excited to get the opportunity to check out the Arcana of Astrology deck. Now, this deck came to me at just the right time because this year I am going to be focusing more on astrology, and I'd like to be incorporating that more into my practice. So this, I think, is going to be a perfect study deck for that. So before we jump into the cards, let's just take a real quick look at the box that it comes in, because this is an absolutely phenomenal box. Now, if you've watched my channel before, you know I don't often keep my decks in their boxes, but this one is quite beautiful. It is, can you hear that? It's like actually made of what feels to be like book board. This is a solid box. It has gorgeous detail on the outside, and of course more sort of gilded silver on the front with the moon and the astrological symbols. This is an absolutely beautifully produced box. It has the flip top open, which is wonderful, and inside we have the gorgeous papers. And inside you can see here that we have the gorgeous symbols, and the card sits in the tray. And I do have to say that this is about the only type of tray that I think really works in a deck box, because it has 4 solid sides so the cards don't slip around in there, and it does have the little cutouts so you can stick your finger in there and get the cards out. It also has a lovely little moon inside that says, "Let the stars be your guide." So an absolutely beautiful box. This is gorgeously produced, and I think it looks beautiful on a shelf. So of course it also comes with the gorgeous guidebook, which we will take a look at here in a moment, but you know me, I like to jump right into those cards. So starting off, we have the 12 signs of the zodiac with Aquarius, Pisces, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio. I love the background designs on these cards and the pop of the white with the constellations drawn in. I think that's just gorgeous. Cancer, Leo, Gemini, Taurus, Aries. So then we go into the sort of sun and moon phases as well. We have ascendant, or for rising, the sun, the new moon, love that, the waxing crescent moon, first quarter moon, waxing gibbous moon, full moon. That's a beautiful card too. I do like how the illustrations in this deck, it looks like it's actually taking a slice of the new or the dark moon, and they're intermingled together. And I just think that's really beautiful. Just those little touches that really make it quite lovely. Then we have the last quarter moon, the waning crescent moon, have the lunar eclipse, always handy to have those, and the solar eclipse. So again, with these, using the same illustrations for the new moon or the dark moon and the full moon, which I think is really lovely, just creates that nice continuity in the deck. So here we have Mercury, so moving into the planets. I do really like that each of them has the sign. We also saw that on the zodiacs as well. So in addition to, say, the constellations that we saw here, we also have the zodiac sign on every card. And that's really handy when you're actually working with those or journaling, which is something that I do a lot, right? I find that really helpful when I can have these, particularly to have them as a reference point, because a lot of times I forget which symbol goes with which. And so I love that they are on there. So we have Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. I love the look of Pluto in this deck. So now I think we're moving into the major asteroids. So we have Chiron, Ceres, Juno, Vesta, Phallus Athena or Peleus Athena. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Lilith, that's a beautiful one. I love that purple color. Hygiena, again, not sure how that's pronounced, so I might be slaughtering it. Eris, I love the Eris card as well. Psyche, Eros, and now we move into the houses. So we have one card for every house. I love that we'll see here there are different colors and you can see the slice that it represents. So we have the first house, the second house, and we'll watch it move around. Again, I love the color change. Third house, fourth house, fifth house, the sixth house, the seventh house, the eighth house, the ninth house, the 10th house, the 11th house, and finally the 12th house. And of course we have the beautiful back of the cards with the zodiac wheel, which I think is just gorgeous. Does match the book and the box, which is always lovely, again, for that continuity. So again, really lovely setup, I think, on this deck. We have the 12 zodiac signs, we have the sun and moon phases, we have the planets and major asteroids, and then of course we have all the houses. So this deck is, of course, a reprint of the original Arcana of Astrology, which was an indie deck that was released by Claire Goodchild of Black and the Moon. And this one has 42 cards. So I thought we would just take a look at the differences, the changes between the two decks, because this one has a few more cards and there were a few minor design changes. Big change in the box, of course, because the original had just the plain tuck box and the little pamphlet, which I think did have quite a bit of good information in it, but now we have a big, beautiful guidebook and a gorgeous box. So for those of you that are interested in taking a look at the comparison between the new mass market edition and the indie edition, I thought we'd just do a really quick side-by-side comparison so we can see how things have shifted between one edition to the other and what cards have been added or removed. So going through the zodiacs, we have Aquarius, and you can see that there is quite a difference in color on the Aquarius in the indie edition, which is on the right here, versus the mass market edition, which is on the left. So besides the constellation actually being drawn in, which for me, I like that it's drawn in on the mass market edition because that really brings it to the forefront and it really makes it stand out and really pop. I do quite like the blue purple coloring over here. However, this coloring does feel very water and Aquarius to me, but I think both are absolutely lovely. And you can see here, of course, that the titles are a little bit different and the color tone is a little bit different. The color tone on the mass market edition is a little bit richer than it is in the indie edition, which I think is really, really lovely. I think it really helps to make the colors pop. So let's just take a quick flip through so we can see some of the differences. So in Pisces, again, just that kind of little bit bolder, richer color. I think in the indie edition, things look a little bit more like that vintage star map. They're a little bit more, a little less saturated, a little bit more antique looking, which is quite lovely as well, but I do quite like the pop of color in the new edition. I think they're quite stunning. Here we see a huge change in Sagittarius where we have it in purple over here and in this kind of almost magenta going to red, which I think is really lovely. So in Capricorn, again, we can see there's more of a mix or of a variety of colors in the new edition, whereas in the indie edition, we tended to have more just solid colors represented for each of the planets and zodiacs and things of that nature in this deck. But I do quite like the new colors. You can see, again, change in Virgo from a primarily blue color to a primarily green. Libra, we're going from blue to pink. Now, I really don't know that much about color association when it comes to astrology, to know which one would be considered more accurate, or if there really is a color association for each of these zodiacs. My knowledge is that limited that I really don't know the difference. I feel like pink is a really good color for Libra. From what I know of Libra, just off the top of my head, in my very limited knowledge, I feel like that's a good color over the blue, but again, both are beautiful. So here we have Scorpio. In this case, I actually like the color on this particular one better. I really like that deep burgundy, that maroon mixing in with all those different shades of red. This one, of course, matches the overall aesthetic of the deck as well. But for color tone, I kind of like this one better just because I think it's a really deep, kind of powerful type of energy, which is what I think of when I think of Scorpio. So here we have Cancer, where we've gone from pink to blue. I do quite like the blue for that one. So Leo is just, again, a little bit different. We have more of a red over here and more of a kind of yellowish orange over here. I do quite like the bright colors over here, but I really do like the red that's included in this one. I think that fits well into Leo energy. So here we have Gemini. Again, not a huge shift in color. They're still primarily both green, but I love the inclusion of the sort of turquoisey blue over there. I think that's beautiful. Taurus. I associate Taurus with the color green. That is my sun sign, and I always just associate it with green, but that could be my total personal association. I do like purple, and so I think this works quite beautifully, but again, my personal association for that one is green. Aries, I think, is beautiful. I like them both really well. I really do, but I do kind of like the variations we get in here. It feels almost a little bit more like fiery, exploding outward, which I think is really beautiful. Real quick before we move on, of course, we have differences in the backs, where the new mass market edition has this very colorful kind of galaxy type background with the zodiac, which I think is really neat. And then here we have just the plain black with the zodiac. Again, this feels a little bit more vintage, a little bit more traditional, but I think this card back really is quite lovely, and it kind of gives me a little bit more of that sort of new agey feel to it, so to speak, whereas this one feels a little bit more vintage. So moving on to the planets and major asteroids, well, again, we'll see a little bit of a shift in color tones between these two. Same deal where the indie edition on the right here, I think definitely has a little bit more of a vintage vibe, where the new mass market edition is a little bit crisper, cleaner, a little bit poppier. So we have Mercury, which is pretty close in their design. Here the text is pink and here the text is red. Very similar in color tone as well. So here we have Venus, where we have just, again, a brighter kind of orange here and a little bit more muted color palette over on the indie edition. The one thing I did want to note is that the new mass market edition does not have an Earth card. I did check the guidebook just to make sure that there wasn't like supposed to be one in there and I just missed it. It does not. I didn't see any association for the Earth card in the new edition, so that seems to be just primarily in the indie edition, and I do quite like it. I kind of wish there was one in the new edition, but I don't know how often Earth actually plays into astrology work, because again, that's just something I'm really starting to get into, but I think it's a beautiful card, so I enjoy having it in the indie edition as well. You can see Mars here is very close in both of them, and I think they're both beautiful. Jupiter, we see a little bit more of a shift in color tone, a little bit more oranges over here. Definitely in terms of the titles, we have the blue and the orange. I think it's beautiful. Both are beautiful, but I do quite like this new illustration for it. Saturn looks very much the same. The titles, of course, are a little bit different colors. They're more gray over here and more yellow over here. I feel like, again, the colors are just a bit poppier in the mass market edition. Really beautiful too. Same with Uranus. Very similar artwork, very similar color tones, just a little bit more contrast over here in the mass market edition. Similar Neptune. Very similar Pluto. I do really like this one with a little bit higher contrast. I think that that's really beautiful. And looking at the text, I think the text is a little bit easier to read on the mass market edition. There's a little bit more space, whereas the astrological symbols kind of merge into the titles in the indie edition, which is totally cool. But as far as just being able to read, I think the mass market edition is a little bit easier to read. Chiron, again, very similar, just a little bit more saturated, a little bit more contrast in the mass market edition. Here we see a pretty big shift in series because we have the more gradiated effect from the blue to the red to the green, and in the mass market edition we just have the variegated green color. I think both are really beautiful. I don't know that I necessarily prefer one over the other. Again, kind of similar with Juno here, where we have a bit more color tone in the indie edition and a little bit just less variegation, still the same kind of colors, I think. But again, I don't know enough about my planets and astrology and all of that to really be able to tell you if one is more accurate than the other. So pretty big shift here in Vesta. I feel like these are two totally different images. I think they're both beautiful. I do really like the texture that we have going on in this one. Just feels a little bit more, it feels like there's a little bit more depth to it. But again, both beautiful images. Same kind of thing here. I kind of like this one with a bit more of the texture to it. And again, we have the addition of the word Athena on this card. Again, I really am going to have to study these decks because I really don't know much about them. I really do like the Lilith card in the indie edition. I love that merging from the kind of really navy blue to the purple with the black in the middle. I think that's beautiful. The mass market edition is gorgeous as well too, but I do really like that color shift. So here these two look almost exactly the same. Interesting that the symbols are different though. So that's definitely something that I need to look into. And I haven't been paying attention because here on Eris, the symbols are different as well. So I need to look into that a little bit more. Again, really similar artwork here, a little bit more texture going on in the indie edition than the mass market edition. And I think this one pops a little bit more, but they're both beautiful. So for Psyche, again, we have that shifting where we have a little bit more of a gradient tone over here in Psyche. Gorgeous cards though. This one looks really, really similar. Very few differences, maybe a little bit more texture over here in the indie edition, but really, really close. So moving into the sun and moon phases, I did notice that there is no ascendant card in the indie edition, so that is a new addition to the mass market deck, which I do quite like having that in there. Here we have the two sun cards. Again, really similar, just a little bit bump up in color on the mass market edition. Same with the new moon cards. I feel like the indie edition is just it's a little more muted, and the mass market edition is just a little bit brighter colors. Very, very similar on the waxing crescent. The only real difference is the addition of the word moon here, which we don't have in the indie edition, but I feel like the artwork is pretty much the same. Same with the first quarter, the waxing gibbous, the full moon. This full moon is a bit more texturized. You can actually see the craters and things in the moon, which I do quite like, whereas this one is a little bit more stylized, a little bit more like watercolor. It's just a little bit less defined as a moon, so I do quite like this one in the new edition. Last quarter, waning. And our eclipse cards are quite different in these two decks. So in the indie edition, we have the single image where you can see the ring behind it. And here we have one coming over the other. I don't know that I necessarily like one better than the other. I think they're both beautiful, and I really like the way both are represented. Just two different ways to kind of depict the same energy, which I think is quite lovely. I do like the mix of colors over here, but then I do like the separation of the two elements between the sun and the moon on the mass market edition. And we have the same thing for the solar eclipse as well. This one, I think the blue color doesn't quite line up for me, so I do like this kind of gold texture that we have here to represent the sun. That just works a little bit better for me. I like the look of that. Beautiful artwork still either way. So the big thing that the indie edition does not have is the house cards. So between the house cards and the ascendant card, that's the new cards that have been added to the mass market edition of the deck. So in the indie edition, we have the earth card, no ascendant card, and no houses. In the mass market, we have the addition of the ascendant and the houses, but we are missing the earth card. And so I think it's just interesting to compare the two in case you have, one or the other, might be thinking about getting one or the other. I actually don't believe that the indie edition is still available because it has gone mass market. I could be wrong though, so I will definitely check into that. But again, just a few more cards in the new indie edition. So the card stock between the two is actually really, really close now. The mass market edition has the newer card stock that this particular publisher is using. It's not the super flimsy that they used the first time in the Antique Anatomy. It is that a little bit more sturdier cardstock. They do feel quite similar. They have a nice kind of satiny finish, which I really like, and they have a nice bend to them. Really, really similar. I think they're even the same size. Yes. So really, really similar in production quality. I think that they're both beautifully produced decks. I am really excited to have the mass market edition because of that book. So let's go ahead and take a look at that next. So this gorgeous guidebook, I love all of Claire Goodchild's guidebooks. They are so beautifully produced. I love that they're full color. They're also a great size, real easy to read, and I really like the way Claire approaches her writing. It's very easy to read, very easy to understand, and I feel like this is going to be a really good guide for me in really diving into astrology for the first time, really, or I should say in depth, really, for the first time. So in the book, we have the contents. I love when we get these big, beautiful full color images. I'm just a sucker for that. So here we have a little bit of what is astrology, a little bit about reading your natal chart, which I'm really excited about because I just had my chart done not too long ago. So some on the elements, modalities, and polarities. Those are all things that I need to learn about. So I'm excited to have this as a jumping off point. We have the aspects. And again, I really think this is going to be a wonderful beginner's guide if you're not familiar with astrology. Now, I haven't actually read this book cover to cover yet, but I have flipped through it several times, and I do feel like it really kind of gives you a really good basic introduction to kind of get you started working with astrology and, of course, using the beautiful cards. So here she goes into using the deck. We have the 1 card, 3 card, the astrology spread. That one I'm really excited to work with. And the other thing that I really like is she talks about using this as a study guide, which is definitely where my intention is going to start with this deck because I am just really beginning my astrology journey. I'm really excited to work with this deck as a study guide and use this book. So I love that she's actually included that as kind of a point of reference for those of us who do like to study using our cards. So then we go into the zodiacs, and we have a beautiful full page image for each card, and we have information about each of the signs. We have the astrological glyph, the planetary ruler, the house, element, modality, opposite zodiac, and symbols. All of that is really great because I'm definitely going to be looking at those correspondences. So we have Aries in astrology and Aries in a reading, and then we have some keywords down here, which is really wonderful, I think. Beautiful. And we have that for all of the signs. I love how each image kind of reflects the energy of the zodiac. I think that's really beautiful. So here we have the ascendant for the mask. I like that there are keywords. So here we have the planets. Again, beautiful images. So we have not only the name of the planet, but we have sort of like a key phrase or a title, so to speak, which I think is really great because I think that really will help me to kind of make those associations between the planets. We have all of the moon phases here, which is wonderful because moon work is definitely something that I use quite heavily. So here we have Mercury for the messenger, Venus for the muse, Mars for the leader, Jupiter for the philosopher, Saturn for the oppressor. I love these keywords. Uranus for the rebel, Neptune for the mystic, Pluto for the reaper. Then we have the houses. And this is definitely something that I need to work on learning more. Then we have the asteroids, and that's something that is definitely a new concept for me. So I'm definitely excited to learn more about those and to read more about those. It says the asteroids are fairly new in the study of astrology, though they are proving to have immense value in the natal chart. The planets deal with so much. They are bound to drop a few things on their journey. This is where the asteroids come in. Think of them as the supports who pick up the slack. I think that's really great. I'm really looking forward to learning more about those. So again, similar to each of those, we have the asteroid and a sort of archetype for it. So we have the healer, the mother, the partner, the keeper, the warrior, the shadow, the purifier, the destroyer, the goddess, and the lover. So gorgeous. Then we have a glossary, which is super helpful for people like me who are just learning. It's beautifully produced, and I think there is a great starting off point for information. I feel like this is a really good introductory to working with astrology, and I love the way that Claire writes because she makes things really easy to understand. So I'm definitely excited to dive deep into that book and pretty much read it cover to cover and then use it as a study guide, and then of course to jump into working with these cards. As I mentioned, I think earlier, I do plan on using these cards more as like a study tool to start with, so that I can really work on kind of some of my own, not only just learning the astrology, but also work on some of my own astrology readings. So that's definitely something that I would like to do. I'd like to be able to tie this more into my tarot practice. So I'm really looking forward to using these cards in that aspect as well. So that was a look at the Arcana of Astrology, the new mass market edition by Claire Goodchild, along with a little bit of a comparison to the indie edition that either was or is currently available. I will have to check the status on that because I forgot to do that prior to sitting down to film, because I was just excited to jump into these cards and take a look at this deck. Thank you for joining me today. You will find links for the decks featured here in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video and will join me again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.